By the time the average American turns 45, they're carrying more debt than at any other point in their entire life. Over $150,000. Not because they're reckless, not because they're lazy, because nobody ever told them what normal actually looks like at each age. So they compared themselves to Instagram instead of reality and made decisions in the dark for 20 years straight. Today we're breaking down exactly how much debt is normal at every age, from your early 20s all the way to your 70s and beyond, using real financial data. Not guesses, not vibes, not fear-mongering designed to get clicks. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where you stand, ahead, behind, or right on track. Stick around, because the number in the middle of this video, the single most indebted decade in the entire country, is probably not the age you'd guess, and the reason why will change how you think about every financial decision you make from here on out. Quick thing before we go further. This channel breaks down the real numbers behind money in America every single week. Net worth, debt, income, savings, all the stuff school never taught you and your parents probably never explained either. If you want a clear, honest picture of where you actually stand financially compared to people your exact age, hit subscribe right now, because we're about to walk through age brackets most people have never seen laid out this clearly in one place. Okay, let's start with the big picture, then work our way decade by decade through the entire adult financial life. Right now, Americans collectively owe more than $17 trillion. That's trillion, with a T. Mortgages, credit cards, auto loans, student loans, all combined into one number, so big it barely means anything on its own until you break it apart. And that number sounds terrifying until you realize something important. Not all debt is the same, and not all debt is a problem. A 25-year-old with $30,000 in student loans and a career ahead of them is in a completely different position than a 55-year-old carrying $30,000 in high-interest credit card debt with no plan to pay it off. Same number on paper. Completely different situation underneath it. So instead of reacting to one scary headline figure, we're going to break debt down age bracket by age bracket, using data pulled from major financial and credit reporting studies, so you can actually compare yourself to your real peers, not to a headline written specifically to get you to panic and click. Let's split that trillion-dollar number into what it's actually made of, because the breakdown tells a very different story than the headline. Mortgages make up the biggest slice by far, sitting around $12.3 trillion. The vast majority of American debt is tied directly to housing. Student loans come in next at roughly $1.6 trillion, spread across more than 40 million borrowers. Auto loans sit at almost the exact same size, around $1.6 trillion, because car prices climbed just as aggressively as home prices over the last several years. And credit cards, the debt everyone worries about most, actually make up the smallest major category, around $1.3 trillion, but carry by far the highest interest rates of the group, which is exactly why it does the most psychological and financial damage per dollar owed. Keep that ranking in mind as we go through every age bracket, because the mix of these four categories changes dramatically as you get older. Before we dive into the age brackets, quick translation, because you'll hear these generational labels thrown around constantly in the numbers ahead. Gen Z is roughly 18 to 26 years old right now. Millennials are the 27 to 42 crowd. Gen X covers 43 to 58. Baby boomers run from 59 to 77. And the silent generation is 78 and up. Keep that in your head as we go, because the truly surprising part of this video isn't really about generations as a whole. It's about the specific age brackets tucked inside them, since debt behaves completely differently at 25 than it does at 35. Even for people who technically fall into the exact same generational label. Let's start at the very beginning, ages 18 to 24. Average total debt in this group sits around $18,900. That might sound like a lot for people who just started working, but here's the context that actually matters. Most of that is student loans, not lifestyle spending. This is, statistically, the healthiest debt profile of any age bracket in the entire country, because it's overwhelmingly tied to future earning potential instead of pure consumption. Average credit card debt here is only around $3,500, but it's growing faster in this age group than in any other, because this is the very first time most people have access to real credit with essentially zero experience managing it responsibly. Auto loan debt is comparatively low too, since a lot of people in this bracket are still driving a hand-me-down car or a cheap used vehicle bought with cash. The rule for this decade is simple, and it will save you more money than almost anything else in this video. Treat your credit card exactly like a debit card. If you can't pay the full balance every single month, you're not building credit. You're quietly building a habit that will cost you thousands of dollars in interest over the next 10 years. Fix it now, while the numbers involved are still small enough to fix easily and painlessly. Now we jump into the late 20s and early 30s, and the number jumps dramatically to around $125,000 in average total debt. This is the decade where life gets expensive fast. A first mortgage, a real car loan instead of a beater, sometimes a wedding, sometimes a first kid, sometimes all three within a couple of years of each other. The average mortgage balance for someone under 35 who just bought a home is now north of $240,000. Because home prices climbed so much faster than wages over the last decade that first-time buyers are financing far more than previous generations ever had to at this exact age. This is also the age where student loan balances actually peak for most people, averaging around $33,000. Since it captures people who went back for a master's degree or a professional certification and stacked it right on top of undergraduate loans they hadn't finished paying off yet. If you're in this bracket and feeling behind, understand this clearly, you're not behind. You're living through the single most expensive entry point into homeownership in modern American history, and the data proves it's not just you feeling that pressure. Let's stay on student loans for a second, because they deserve their own explanation instead of getting lumped in as young people's debt. Over 40 million Americans carry federal student loan debt, and contrary to the stereotype, the average balance is actually highest for people in their 30s and 40s, not fresh graduates in their early 20s, because that's exactly when people go back for a master's degree, a nursing certification, or a law degree on top of undergraduate loans they hadn't even finished paying off yet. The typical bachelor's degree borrower graduates owing around $30,000, but roughly 1 in 10 borrowers owes over $100,000, almost always from graduate or professional programs stacked on top. Income-driven repayment plans can cap your monthly payment as a percentage of your income instead of a fixed dollar amount, which helps your cash flow today, but can stretch the timeline out for decades if the payment isn't even covering the interest that's accruing. The rule that matters here: if you're on an income-driven plan, check once a year whether the actual balance is shrinking or quietly growing, because a payment that feels perfectly affordable can still be losing you ground every single month without you noticing. Here's a piece of math almost nobody walks you through, and it applies at every single age bracket in this video. Say you carry a $5,000 credit card balance at a typical 24% interest rate, and you only ever make the minimum payment. That balance can take well over 15 years to fully pay off, and by the time it's gone, you'll have paid more in interest alone than the original $5,000 you borrowed. 15 years for a $5,000 mistake. That's the entire mechanism behind why credit card debt does so much damage relative to its size compared to a mortgage or a student loan. The interest rate isn't just higher. It's often 4 to 6 times higher, compounding against you every single month you don't pay it off in full. So let's cover the two methods that actually work for paying any of this down, because knowing your number means nothing without an actual plan attached to it. Method 1 is the debt avalanche. List every debt you have by interest rate, pay the minimum on everything, and throw every extra dollar at the highest interest rate account first. Mathematically, this saves you the most money, period, full stop. Method 2 is the debt snowball. Same basic idea, but you attack the smallest balance first regardless of its interest rate, because paying off one account completely gives you a psychological win that keeps you motivated to keep going. The avalanche saves more money on paper. The snowball keeps more people consistent in practice. The best method, honestly, is whichever one you'll actually stick with for the next 2 to 3 years, because a mediocre plan you follow every month beats a perfect plan you abandon in month 4 out of frustration. Here's a real pattern that shows exactly how this plays out in an actual household. A couple in their early 30s, combined income around $95,000, found themselves $78,000 in debt between student loans, 2 car payments, and credit cards, completely normal for their age bracket and completely overwhelming to actually live with day to day. Instead of trying to attack everything at once and burning out in month 2, they used the avalanche method. Full list, minimum payments everywhere, every spare dollar aimed at the highest interest rate account first. It took them 34 months. Not glamorous, not fast. It worked because they had an actual number written down and an actual deadline attached to it, instead of a vague feeling of, we should probably deal with this someday. That's the real difference between people who stay stuck for a decade and people who get out in under 3 years. A plan on paper, not a plan floating around in their head. If this is giving you a clearer picture of exactly where you stand, tap that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need real numbers instead of guesswork and Instagram comparisons. Now let's move into the decade where debt keeps climbing even further, and where the financial pressure really starts to build up fast. In your late 30s and early 40s, average total debt climbs even further, often past $135,000. This is peak sandwich decade territory. You might be paying a mortgage, supporting kids, and in some cases helping aging parents financially, all at the exact same time, on the exact same paycheck. Auto loan balances are typically highest in this bracket too, averaging over $23,000, because families often need two reliable vehicles instead of one aging car that might not start on a cold morning before school drop-off. None of this is a personal failure. It's simply the most expensive stretch of the average adult life, and the data backs that up clearly, decade after decade, household after household, across every income level. But here's where it gets genuinely dangerous. This is also the decade with the highest rate of lifestyle creep. The bigger house, the private school tuition, the upgraded vacation, all financed instead of saved for in advance like a real plan. The families who come out of this decade ahead financially aren't the ones who earn the most money. They're the ones who kept fixed costs, housing, cars, subscriptions, below a certain percentage of income, no matter how much the paycheck grew year over year. Write this down and remember it. If your expenses grow every single time your income grows, you will never actually get ahead, no matter how many raises or promotions you collect along the way. Auto loans deserve their own call-out too, because the terms have quietly gotten worse for the average buyer over the last 15 years. 2 decades ago, a 60-month car loan was the standard. Today, 72 and even 84-month loans are common, specifically because they're often the only way many buyers can make the monthly payment fit their budget on a car that costs far more than it used to. The problem is straightforward. Stretch a loan out that long, and you spend years owing more than the car is actually worth. A situation called negative equity, which becomes a real, expensive problem the moment you want to sell it, trade it in, or the car gets totaled in an accident and the insurance check doesn't cover the loan balance. The average new car loan today runs well past $40,000, and monthly payments above $700 are no longer rare, even among buyers with solid, stable income. The fix isn't necessarily never finance a car. It's capping the loan term at 60 months or less, and treating any loan longer than that as a clear signal that the car itself is outside your actual budget, not just outside your monthly cash flow. And now here's the number that surprises almost everyone watching this video. The single highest average debt bracket in the entire country isn't young people. It's ages 45 to 54, sitting at around $155,000. This is the generation squeezed the hardest from every direction. Still carrying a mortgage, often still paying off a car, sometimes funding a kid's college tuition, and simultaneously trying to catch up on retirement savings they quietly put off a decade earlier because life, kids, and mortgages got in the way. Add one more layer on top of that. This is also the decade where parents start co-signing or directly funding college tuition, sometimes taking on parent loans that average over $30,000 per student per year in some cases. Combine a mortgage, a car payment, leftover credit card debt, and a brand new education loan for your kid, and you get a bracket that's financially maxed out even at solid 6-figure household incomes that look comfortable from the outside. And this is the decade where the sunk cost feeling gets the strongest. You've already put in 20 years of payments, so pulling back on anything feels like giving up, even when pulling back is exactly the move that actually protects your retirement. The families who navigate this decade best set one hard rule early and never break it. No matter how guilty they feel, retirement savings comes before tuition help every single time. Because you can always borrow money for college, but nobody hands out low-interest loans for retirement at age 68. If you're in this bracket right now and it feels heavier than it logically should, it's not you. This is, statistically and consistently, the single most financially loaded decade of the average American's entire life. Here's a real pattern that shows up constantly right in this exact age bracket. A 48-year-old, solid job, $130,000 household income, but $210,000 in combined mortgage, car, and credit card debt, feeling like a financial failure despite doing everything right on paper for 2 decades straight. The fix wasn't a side hustle. It wasn't a miracle inheritance. It was refinancing the mortgage into a better rate, consolidating high-interest credit card debt into a single lower-rate personal loan, and cutting 2 subscription services nobody in the house even used anymore. 18 months later, the monthly debt payment dropped by $640, money that went straight into a retirement account instead of straight into interest charges every month. Same income the entire time. Completely different trajectory going forward. Just from honestly restructuring what already existed, instead of pretending the problem would quietly fix itself over time. There's one category of debt that cuts across every single age bracket in this video, and it rarely shows up in the headline numbers because it doesn't sit neatly on a credit report the way a mortgage does. Roughly 100 million adults in America currently carry some form of medical debt, and it remains the single largest category of debt sent to collections in the entire country, larger than credit cards, larger than personal loans. It hits hardest in your 30s and 40s, when a serious diagnosis or an emergency surgery collides with a mortgage, car payments, and kids all at once, and it hits hardest again after 65, when Medicare doesn't cover everything people assume it does. This is exactly why an emergency fund isn't a nice-to-have line item. It's the single biggest reason people avoid turning a bad month into 10 years of debt they never saw coming. Drop your age bracket in the comments right now. No exact numbers needed. Just tell me if you feel ahead, behind, or right on track after hearing these figures. I read every single comment, and it genuinely tells me which age group to go deeper on in the next video. Now let's look at what actually happens once people start approaching retirement age. From 55 to 64, average total debt finally starts declining, dropping to roughly $108,000. Mortgages are getting paid down or paid off entirely. Kids are typically out of the house and off the family payroll for good, and cars tend to be owned outright instead of financed month after month for years on end. This is the first genuine relief decade in the entire debt curve, but it only shows up clearly for people who made deliberate, boring financial moves back in their 40s and 50s. If you carried lifestyle inflation the whole way through instead of correcting it, this decade doesn't bring relief at all. It brings a much scarier realization instead. And that realization is this. Roughly 1 in 3 people in this age bracket still carry a mortgage into their 60s, with an average remaining balance north of $170,000, right at the exact moment retirement is supposed to begin. That's the real, measurable cost of dragging homeownership decisions out too long, or resetting the clock every single time interest rates happen to drop. The rule here is simple, but genuinely uncomfortable to hear. If your mortgage payoff date lands later than your planned retirement date, one of those 2 dates needs to change, and it's almost always easier and cheaper to change the mortgage than to postpone the entire retirement. You'd assume debt basically disappears by retirement age, but the data says otherwise, consistently, year after year. Ages 65 to 74 still average around $87,000 in total debt, a number that's actually grown over the last decade, as more retirees carry mortgages and credit card balances later into life than any previous generation ever did at this same age. Part of this comes from people retiring later than they originally planned, financing homes closer to retirement age instead of paying them off young like their parents did, and in some cases, helping adult children financially at the exact moment they should be drawing down savings instead of quietly taking on brand new obligations. If you're heading into this decade, the real goal isn't just save enough, it's owe as little as possible going in, because a fixed retirement income has almost zero room to absorb a surprise monthly payment that was never part of the plan to begin with. By 75 and older, average total debt drops to around $39,000, the lowest of any adult bracket in this entire video. But the composition underneath that number shifts entirely. Mortgages and credit cards shrink dramatically at this stage, and medical and long-term care costs become a much bigger share of whatever debt is left. This is the bracket where a single hospital stay, or a sudden need for long-term care, can undo decades of careful, disciplined planning in a matter of months, which is exactly why the framework coming up in a minute matters at every single age covered in this video, not just this final one. Contrast that with a retiree who did it differently. 67 years old, modest pension, nothing flashy about her career or her income, but completely debt-free the exact day she retired. Her approach for the last 20 working years was almost boring on purpose. 1 extra mortgage payment every single month without exception. No car payments at all after age 45, because she paid cash for reliable used vehicles and drove them into the ground. And 1 hard rule for every single raise she ever received. Split it between savings and a small, deliberate lifestyle upgrade. Never all one or the other. Boring, unglamorous, completely repeatable by almost anyone. And it's exactly why she walked into retirement with 0 required monthly debt payments, while people her exact same age were still sending $1,400 a month to a mortgage company every 30 days. One more distinction before we get to the action plan, because it trips people up constantly. Debt and net worth are not the same measurement. and they can move in completely opposite directions at the same time. Someone with $400,000 in mortgage debt on a home worth $600,000 actually has $200,000 in equity working in their favor. They're not $400,000 poorer, they're $200,000 richer, even though the debt number alone looks alarming sitting on its own. That's exactly why this channel also has a full breakdown of average net worth by age, because debt only tells you half of the financial picture, what someone owes, and net worth tells you the other half, what they actually own after subtracting everything they owe. If this video has been useful so far, that one is the natural next step, because seeing both numbers side by side for your own age bracket is what actually tells you whether you're building real wealth or just quietly moving debt around from one place to another. Looking back across every single age bracket we just covered, the same 6 mistakes show up over and over again, regardless of income. Mistake 1. Only ever making minimum payments, which we already showed can turn a $5,000 balance into a 15-year sentence. Mistake 2. Stretching a car loan out to 72 or even 84 months just to shrink the monthly payment, which quietly guarantees you'll owe more than the car is worth for years. Mistake 3. Having no emergency fund at all, which forces every single surprise expense straight onto a credit card at 24% interest instead of coming out of cash you already set aside. Mistake 4. Lifestyle inflation, where every raise gets absorbed by a bigger house or a nicer car instead of ever touching the actual debt balance. Mistake 5. Co-signing or lending money to family without a real written plan, which quietly turns someone else's financial problem into your own credit report the moment they miss a payment. And mistake 6, the quietest one of all, never actually reviewing interest rates on old balances. So a rate that made sense 5 years ago keeps compounding against you today, even though better options exist right now. Fix even 2 or 3 of these at any age in this video, and your entire debt trajectory changes. Beyond just the raw dollar numbers, there are behavioral warning signs that matter even more than the balance itself at any age bracket we've covered today. Warning sign 1. You're only able to make minimum payments, and the total balance barely moves from month to month no matter how hard you try. Warning sign 2. You've started using one credit card to make the payment on another card. That single habit is usually the fastest path from manageable debt to a genuine financial crisis. Warning sign 3. You honestly don't know your total debt number without stopping to add it all up right now, because you can't fix a number you've been actively avoiding looking at for months. Warning sign 4. A single missed paycheck would mean missing a payment on something important, which means your debt-to-income ratio is already stretched too tight for real life to happen to you. And warning sign 5. You feel a small wave of anxiety every time an unknown number calls your phone, and some part of you already suspects why. None of these 5 signs mean you're a financial failure or bad with money. They mean it's time to build the actual plan we just walked through in this video, instead of quietly hoping the feeling eventually goes away on its own. Here's something that rarely gets said out loud in videos like this. Debt shame keeps more people stuck than the debt itself ever could. Surveys consistently show people are more comfortable telling a total stranger their weight or their age than telling them their actual credit card balance. And that secrecy is exactly why so many households never sit down and calculate the real number in the first place. Because looking at it feels like admitting failure, instead of simply gathering information you need to fix it. But look back at every single bracket we just covered together in this video. Essentially, every age group in America carries some form of debt as the statistical norm, not the rare exception. The couple with $78,000, the 48-year-old with $210,000, the retiree who finally hit zero at 67. None of them fixed anything by feeling ashamed of the number sitting on their statement. They fixed it the moment they wrote it down on paper and stopped quietly treating it like a secret. If you take away nothing else from this entire video, take this. Calculate your real number tonight. Say it out loud to one person you actually trust, and notice how much lighter the real problem feels the moment it stops being a secret. So how do you actually use everything we just covered? Start with one distinction that changes how you look at every single number in this entire video. Good debt versus bad debt. Good debt is debt tied to something that grows in value or grows your income over time. A reasonable mortgage on a home you can genuinely afford, student loans for a degree that actually increases your real earning power, a business loan that generates more than it costs you in interest every month. Bad debt is debt tied to something that loses value the moment you buy it. Credit card balances for things you already consumed weeks ago, a car loan stretched out to 84 months just to shrink the monthly payment, financing vacations or electronics you could have simply saved for in 3 months instead. The goal at every single age covered in this video isn't zero debt. It's steadily shifting your personal debt mix toward the good kind and eliminating the bad kind as fast as your budget realistically allows. Before you finance anything at all from this point forward, ask yourself one simple question. Will this debt make me more money later or less money later? A mortgage on a home you can genuinely afford, a loan for education in a field with real, demonstrated demand. Those tend to pass that test easily. A car that eats 20% of your take-home pay, a credit card balance for things you don't even remember buying 3 months later. Those fail immediately, every time. And if you want one hard number to anchor everything we've covered today, try to keep your total monthly debt payments under 36% of your gross income, with housing alone staying under 28% of that same income. Go over those two lines consistently for years at a time, and you're not broke. You're structurally squeezed, no matter how much you actually earn on paper. And if you're already over those lines today, the fix isn't necessarily earning more. It's usually one specific balance, at one specific interest rate, that's doing most of the damage. Find that one account, attack it first with everything you've got, and the ratio starts moving in your favor faster than you'd expect. Let's run through every number one more time, back to back, so it's crystal clear exactly where you personally land in all of this. Ages 18 to 24, around $18,900, mostly student loans, the healthiest debt profile of the entire bunch. Ages 25 to 34, around $125,000, driven by first mortgages and peak student loan balances hitting at the same time. Ages 35 to 44, past $135,000, the sandwich decade, with auto loans and lifestyle creep both peaking together. Ages 45 to 54, the highest of them all, around $155,000, squeezed between a mortgage, a car payment, and a kid's tuition bill. Ages 55 to 64, dropping back down to about $108,000, the first real relief decade, but only for the people who planned ahead a decade earlier. Ages 65 to 74, still around $87,000, higher than most people assume for retirees living on a fixed income. And 75 and up, the lowest point of the entire curve at around $39,000, but increasingly weighted toward medical costs instead of mortgages and credit cards. Debt rises for roughly 25 straight years, peaks hard in your late 40s and early 50s, then spends the next 30 years slowly coming back down. That's the entire shape of the average American financial life, compressed into one sentence. If you want more breakdowns exactly like this one, net worth by age, savings by age, income by age, all using real data instead of guesswork or hype, subscribe right now so you don't miss the next one. This channel exists to hand you the numbers nobody else lays out this clearly, without trying to sell you a course at the end of it. So here's the real takeaway from everything we just walked through together. Debt isn't a scoreboard, and it isn't a moral failure. It's a tool that either works for you or against you, depending entirely on what it's attached to and how long you choose to carry it. Whatever bracket you're in right now, the goal was never to compare yourself to a stranger's Instagram post or a headline built to scare you. It's to know your real number, know whether it's good debt or bad debt, and have an actual plan to shift that ratio a little further in your favor every single year. That's genuinely all wealth building really is underneath all the noise. Small, boring, repeated decisions that quietly compound while nobody's watching and nobody's applauding. Nobody fixes this in a weekend, and nobody should expect to. The households we talked about today took 18 months, 34 months, 20 years of one extra payment at a time. The only real mistake is refusing to start because the full number feels too big to look at all at once. Break it into the one age bracket you're actually in, apply the one framework that matches your situation, and reassess in 12 months instead of waiting for a someday that never quite arrives on its own. If this video gave you a clearer picture of exactly where you stand today, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, where we're breaking down exactly how much you should have saved by every age, and whether you're actually on track or quietly falling behind.